The evening sun settled gently over the open plains. Golden light stretched across the quiet land and painted the old ranch in warm colors that only came at the end of a peaceful day. Thomas Walker stood in the doorway of his weathered barn. He was no longer a young cowboy. His hair had turned silver long ago. His hands were rough from years of honest work. His back carried the weight of many seasons. Yet his heart remained gentle. He believed every day should end with gratitude and every stranger deserved kindness until proven otherwise. Life had taught him that lesson slowly. His late father used to say, "A man becomes rich by the people he helps, not by the money he keeps." Thomas never forgot those words. That evening he noticed someone walking slowly toward the ranch. At first she looked like little more than a shadow against the fading sunlight. As she came closer he saw a young Apache woman dressed in carefully stitched buckskin with beautiful beadwork that reflected the last rays of daylight. Dust covered the hem of her clothing. Her face showed exhaustion but also quiet dignity. She stopped several steps away from him. She did not lower her eyes. She simply stood there with calm respect. "Good evening, sir," she said softly. "My name is Sarah. May I ask for shelter just for tonight?" Thomas studied her face. She looked tired beyond words. Not frightened, not demanding, simply worn down by a long journey. "Of course," he answered. "Everyone deserves a warm meal and a roof before the night grows cold." Relief crossed her face. "Thank you. I promise I will leave before sunrise." Thomas smiled gently. "There is no need to make promises before supper. Come inside." The small ranch house smelled of fresh bread and vegetable stew. Thomas set another bowl on the table. Sarah thanked him quietly before eating. She did not rush. She treated the simple meal with deep appreciation. After several peaceful minutes Thomas asked, "Have you traveled far?" She nodded. "Far enough to understand how valuable kindness really is." That answer stayed with him. Some people spoke many words without saying anything. Sarah spoke very little but every sentence carried meaning. Later that evening Thomas prepared the small guest room that had belonged to his sister many years earlier. The blankets were clean. The room was simple. Before closing the door Sarah turned toward him. "You have trusted someone you do not know. That is rare." Thomas smiled. "Sometimes trust must begin before friendship has the chance to grow." She wished him good night. The ranch became quiet. Only the wind moved softly through the trees. Thomas expected the young woman would leave before dawn. That was usually how these things happened. Travelers came. They rested. Then life carried them somewhere else. He felt grateful he could offer one peaceful night. Nothing more. The next morning Thomas woke before sunrise. He walked outside carrying 2 buckets toward the well. The cool morning air filled his lungs. Birds sang from the cottonwood trees. Everything felt peaceful. As he returned he stopped in surprise. Sarah had already finished sweeping the porch. Fresh water sat beside the horses. The chickens had been fed. Even the old garden gate had been repaired with a piece of rope. Thomas laughed quietly. "You certainly woke early." She smiled for the first time. "My grandmother always said, if someone opens their home you leave it better than you found it." Thomas nodded with quiet admiration. "That is wise advice." Breakfast passed comfortably. Neither felt the need to fill every silence with conversation. Some friendships begin through words. Others begin through shared peace. After breakfast Sarah gathered her small bag. Thomas walked with her to the gate. "Safe travels." "Thank you again," she said. "You reminded me that good people still exist." She started walking down the dusty road. Thomas watched until she disappeared beyond the hills. Then he returned to his work believing he would never see her again. Days turned into weeks. Summer slowly settled across the valley. The ranch remained busy. Thomas repaired fences, gathered hay, cared for his aging horses. Some evenings he found himself remembering the respectful young traveler who had stayed only one night. He hoped she had found whatever she had been searching for. One quiet afternoon an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Samuel, the local storekeeper. Samuel climbed down from his wagon carrying supplies. While unloading flour and coffee he looked toward Thomas with curiosity. "Did an Apache woman visit here recently?" Thomas nodded. "Only for one night. She needed shelter." Samuel smiled. "Then I understand." "Understand what?" Samuel leaned against the wagon. "People have been speaking about her. Wherever she travels she helps others. An elderly widow in the next valley said Sarah repaired her leaking roof. A farming family said she stayed long enough to harvest their crops after the husband injured his leg. She asks for almost nothing. Thomas listened quietly. That sounds like her. Samuel continued. Strange thing is nobody seems to know exactly where she belongs. Only that she always leaves behind grateful hearts. Thomas looked toward the distant hills. Perhaps some people carry home within themselves. Samuel smiled. Perhaps they do. Autumn arrived gently. The evenings became cooler. Golden leaves drifted across the yard. One afternoon while Thomas stacked firewood he noticed a familiar figure walking toward the ranch. He rubbed his eyes. It could not be. But it was. Sarah stood once again at the gate. Her smile was calm. Her eyes carried both happiness and sadness. Thomas greeted her warmly. Welcome back. I did not expect to see you again. Neither did I, she admitted. May I stay another night? Thomas laughed kindly. This ranch has never closed its door to friends. She looked at him with quiet gratitude. Thank you. As evening settled they shared another simple meal. This time their conversation came more easily. Sarah spoke about the villages she had visited. The lonely people she had met. The elderly couples who simply needed someone to listen. Thomas shared stories of his father. His late wife Mary. And the quiet life the ranch had given him. At one point Sarah asked gently. Do you ever feel lonely? Thomas answered honestly. Sometimes. Loneliness visits every person eventually. The important thing is not letting it become a permanent guest. Sarah lowered her eyes thoughtfully. That is true. Very true. After supper they sat outside watching stars slowly appear across the endless western sky. The silence between them felt comfortable. Not empty. Just peaceful. Finally Sarah spoke. There is something I have wanted to tell you since the day we first met. Thomas turned toward her. Go ahead. She smiled gently. When I first came here I truly believed I only needed one night of shelter. She paused. But I discovered something I had not expected. Thomas waited quietly. Sometimes the heart finds a place before the mind understands why. He looked at her with calm curiosity. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage across the ranch. The stars above seemed brighter than they had only moments before. Finally he smiled with the same gentle kindness that had welcomed Sarah on her first visit. I believe I understand what you mean. Sarah looked toward the open fields. When I was a little girl my grandmother often said that every person spends their life searching for two things. A place where they are useful. And a place where they are welcome. She looked back at Thomas. I have found many places where I could help. But very few where I truly felt welcome. Thomas nodded slowly. Then perhaps this ranch has already become one of those places. Sarah smiled warmly. Perhaps it has. The following morning she did not speak about leaving. Instead she quietly joined Thomas in feeding the horses. Together they repaired a broken section of fence. She laughed as one playful goat escaped the pen. Thomas had not heard laughter around the ranch for many years. It made the old place feel alive again. Days passed gently into weeks. Sarah never acted as though the ranch belonged to her. She simply cared for it with gratitude. She planted vegetables beside the old garden. She polished Mary's forgotten rocking chair. She filled empty flower beds with bright wildflowers gathered from the nearby hills. Thomas noticed every small change. The ranch looked the same. Yet somehow it felt different. It felt like home again. One afternoon their nearest neighbor Emma arrived with a basket of fresh apples. She looked around with surprise. Thomas, your ranch has not looked this cheerful in years. Thomas smiled. I have had some unexpected help. Emma greeted Sarah kindly. The three of them shared coffee beneath the shade of the old oak tree. Before leaving Emma whispered to Thomas. That young woman carries peace wherever she goes. Do not take that gift for granted. Thomas watched Sarah watering flowers nearby. I have no intention of taking it for granted. As autumn slowly became winter the evenings grew colder. Snow covered the hills in quiet white blankets. Inside the ranch house the fireplace burned warmly. Thomas and Sarah spent many evenings talking beside the fire. Sometimes they shared childhood memories. Sometimes they spoke of people they had loved and lost. Sometimes they simply listened to the crackling wood. Neither felt uncomfortable with silence. Both had reached an age where silence could be a trusted friend. One evening Sarah carefully removed a small leather pouch from her bag. Inside was an old silver bracelet. It had belonged to my mother, she said softly. She gave it to me before she passed away. Thomas examined it respectfully. It is beautiful. Sarah nodded. She told me never to give it away unless I found people who loved me for my heart instead of my appearance or my history. She gently closed her hand around the bracelet. For years I carried it without understanding her words. Now I finally do. Thomas looked into the fire. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. And I think she would have liked you. The winter passed peacefully. When spring arrived, the valley awakened once again. Wildflowers covered the fields. Young calves wandered beside their mothers. The ranch seemed full of new beginnings. One bright morning Sarah stood beside the garden watching the sunrise. Thomas joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. She accepted one with a grateful smile. There is something I should tell you, she said quietly. Thomas waited patiently. I have decided not to continue wandering. For the first time in many years I do not feel the need to search for another road. Thomas felt warmth spread through his heart. He asked gently, does that mean you have found what you were searching for? Sarah looked across the peaceful ranch. Yes. Not a place. A family. Thomas remained silent for a moment. Then he answered with complete sincerity. Families are not always born together. Sometimes they simply recognize one another. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. She had traveled hundreds of lonely miles. Yet those simple words healed something deep inside her. Months later, the small church in the nearby town welcomed friends and neighbors for a quiet celebration. There was no grand ceremony. No expensive decorations. Only smiling faces, fresh flowers, soft music, and thankful hearts. Thomas stood beside Sarah as they promised to walk through the rest of life together. Not because either of them needed rescuing, but because both had discovered that kindness grows stronger when it is shared. Samuel attended with his wife. Emma baked pies for everyone. Children laughed beneath the old trees outside the church. The entire community celebrated as though their own family had grown larger. Years passed gently. The ranch became known not for its cattle but for its open door. Travelers always found a warm meal. Lonely neighbors always found conversation. Children learned to ride horses in the wide pasture. Older people found quiet afternoons beneath the shade trees where stories were shared and memories were treasured. People often asked Sarah why she had chosen to stay on an old ranch instead of continuing her travels. She always answered with the same peaceful smile. Because one night someone gave me shelter without asking for anything in return. Kindness has a way of becoming home. Thomas would quietly add. And sometimes the greatest blessings arrive looking like ordinary visitors. One evening many years later they sat together on the porch watching another golden sunset. The same sunset that had greeted Sarah the day she first walked toward the ranch. Thomas reached for her hand. Do you remember asking for only one night? Sarah laughed softly. I remember. I truly believed that was all I wanted. He smiled. Life had other plans. She rested her head gently against his shoulder. The best plans are often the ones we never make ourselves. As darkness settled peacefully across the valley, the lights inside the old ranch glowed warmly. It was no longer simply a house standing alone on the prairie. It had become a place where strangers became friends. Where sorrow slowly became hope. Where kindness quietly changed lives one gentle act at a time. And perhaps that is the lesson worth carrying into every season of life. We never truly know what someone is carrying when they knock upon our door. A little compassion may last far longer than one evening. One welcoming smile may become a lifetime of friendship. And one simple act of kindness offered without expectation may grow into a family built not by blood but by love, respect, humility, and understanding. The old ranch remained standing through many changing seasons. Just as love built on kindness remained strong through every passing year. And every sunset reminded Thomas and Sarah that the greatest treasures in life are rarely planned. They are simply welcomed with an open heart.